Congratulations on your purchase of the Masimo Rad57 pulse co-oximeter. You have taken a significant step forward in protecting not only the citizens you serve, but the safety of those charged with serving them, your own personnel. This instructional video will cover setup, operation, and best practices for your Rad57. While this video will focus on measuring non-invasive carboxyhemoglobin, SPCO, depending on the way your device is configured, the Rad57 is also capable of measuring non-invasive methemoglobin, SPMet, total hemoglobin, SpHb, oxygen content, SpOC, and pleth variability index, PVI, along with SpO2, pulse rate, and perfusion index. First, begin by identifying the contents of the shipping carton: the Rad57 pulse co-oximeter, the sensor known as a rainbow sensor, an ambient light shield, a protective carrying case, 4 AA batteries, a Rad57 quick reference guide, and the Rad57 operator's manual. A 1-foot patient cable may also be included, depending upon the sensor option that was chosen. If you are missing any of these items, contact your Masimo sales representative. Next, assemble the equipment. On the back panel of the Rad57, you'll find the battery compartment. Depress the small rectangular button at the bottom of the cover and slide the cover down. Insert the 4 AA batteries as indicated, then replace the cover. Place the Rad57 into the protective carrying case. Next, remove the sensor from the box. In order to provide the maximum protection to the cable, feed it through the Velcro at the top on the back of the case, not through the same opening that the Rad57 was placed in. Insert the connector into the Rad57 until you hear a snap. Make sure it's a firm connection and the cable is not twisted, sliced, or frayed. If you have chosen to use a patient cable, connect it to the device using these same steps. Then connect the sensor to the patient cable and close the clear plastic fastener. Place the Rad57 quick reference guide in the clear pocket on the inside top left corner of the carrying case. The ambient light shield can be stored in either the front outside pocket or the back outside pocket. If you are using the light shield included with your sensor, this can be placed in the same pockets. Now that your Rad57 is assembled in its carrying case, you are ready to begin basic operations. First, and very important, is sensor placement and operation. While it looks and functions similar to a conventional pulse oximeter, it is important to remember that the Rad57 pulse co-oximeter is actually a far more sophisticated piece of equipment. Proper sensor placement is a critical component to accurate SPCO readings. There are several simple but very important steps you must follow for proper rainbow sensor placement. Step 1. Select the appropriately sized sensor for the patient's finger. For adults with average to large sized fingers, use the adult sensor. For patients between 10 and 30 kilograms, and for adults with slender fingers, use the pediatric or small finger sensor. The rainbow sensor should be used on fingers only. Using the rainbow sensor on toes or earlobes, even on pediatric patients, will cause inaccurate readings. Using the non-dominant hand, the following order is preferred. First the ring finger, then the middle, and finally the index finger. The finger should be clean and dry. Nail polish should be removed. Step 2. Hold the sensor in the open position and carefully insert the patient's finger into the sensor until it reaches the digit stop, and then allow the sensor to clamp onto the finger. The digit stop is a small black elevated block located on the bottom of the sensor near the hinge. It is very important that the finger is inserted all the way until it touches the digit stop. Not inserting the finger far enough or inserting the finger too far may result in inaccurate readings. The patient's fingernail may extend over the stop tab. When placing the sensor on the patient's finger, ensure that it's right side up. There is a picture of a finger on the top of the sensor, and the cable will run over the top of the patient's hand when applied correctly. It's also important that the sensor is aligned so that it's straight on the finger. If the sensor is crooked, twisted, or angled at all, light can pass around the finger and inaccurate readings are likely. If you remove the sensor from the patient or are screening multiple patients, make sure to close the sensor clip completely for a minimum of 5 seconds before applying or reapplying the sensor. This will signal to the device that it's in probe off condition and will stop all monitoring activity before beginning a new measurement. If you need to adjust the positioning of the sensor when it's already applied to the patient's finger, remove the sensor completely and reapply. For accurate readings, it's important to take a few extra seconds to ensure that the sensor has been placed correctly on the finger. Step 3. Shield the sensor in environments with excessive ambient light. Rainbow sensors utilize more than 7 wavelengths of light to measure parameters such as SPCO. This includes wavelengths of light in the visible spectrum. That means that if you can see the light, the rainbow sensor could potentially see the light as well if it's not properly shielded. Low-intensity light, such as light in the back of an ambulance, light inside of a patient's home, or the average light inside of a building typically will not interfere with the device. However, high-intensity light, such as strobe lights, or bright, direct sunlight can interfere with the device's ability to calculate an SPCO reading. If you are in an environment with excessive ambient light, for example, screening patients outside in direct sunlight, or running firefighter rehab next to an emergency vehicle with its strobe lights on, it is strongly recommended you shield the sensor. This is the purpose of the ambient light shield. If you are using the bag shield that came with your sensor, place the sensor on the patient's finger first. Then, place the bag over the sensor and secure it with the Velcro strap. If you've elected to use the rubber boot shield, insert the sensor all the way into the light shield prior to placing it on the patient's finger. The cable should run out of the top of the opening. Once the sensor is in the light shield, insert the finger into the sensor, making sure that it is properly aligned, and the finger is pushed all the way to the digit stop. If you don't have a light shield available, anything that completely shields the sensor from light will do. This could be a towel, jacket, blanket, pillow, etc. This does not include covering the sensor with your hand. Light can seep in around your fingers and interfere with the calculations. Regardless of the light shield used, be careful that you do not disturb the sensor positioning on the finger when you place the shield. This will likely cause inaccurate readings. So to review, proper rainbow sensor application is achieved by following these simple but extremely important steps. Step 1. Select the appropriately sized sensor for the patient's finger. Step 2. Carefully insert the patient's finger into the sensor until it reaches the digit stop and it is properly aligned in the sensor. Step 3. Shield the sensor in environments with excessive ambient light. For more information about sensor placement and operation, consult the directions for use included with your sensor. To turn the Rad57 on, press the green power button. All LEDs will temporarily illuminate while an audible tone is heard. To turn the Rad57 off, press and hold the green power button for 2 seconds. You have the option of programming your Rad57 to automatically power down after 5, 10, or 15 minutes of inactivity, or to stay on until the device is manually powered down. In the default mode, the device will not automatically turn off. If you would like the Rad57 to automatically power down, please consult your operator's manual for complete instructions on how to access this feature. 4 green LED indicator lights located below the power button show the remaining battery life. When the battery life indicator shows only 1 green bar, it's time to replace the batteries. The gray button labeled Display is used to cycle through the different parameters. The yellow button is the alarm silence button. When a parameter has violated its preset alarm limit, an audible alarm will sound and the display screen will automatically show the alarming parameter. Press this button once to temporarily silence the audible alarm for 120 seconds. The visual alarm indicator, located on the top right corner of the device, will continue to flash until the parameter falls within the alarm limits. The Enter, Next, Up, and Down arrows are used to access the menu functions. To see a full list of the menu functions available on your Rad57 and the alarm limits, please consult your operator's manual. The up and down arrows are also used to control the pulse tone volume. The pulse tone is an audible representation of the patient's pulse rate. To turn the pulse tone off, push the down arrow until the tone is no longer heard. The bar to the left of the LED display is the SIQ bar. The signal IQ provides an indication of the caliber of the acquired signal. The green vertical LED bar rises and falls with the pulse rate. A full bar graph indicates a very strong signal, while a low bar graph indicates a weaker signal. If the signal is inadequate, the low SIQ indicator will flash. This is a blue light located just above the yellow alarm silence button. For more information on the low SIQ indicator, consult the operator's manual. The bar to the right of the LED display is the PI bar. The perfusion index, or PI, represents the peripheral perfusion of the digit that the sensor is applied to. Each patient will read differently. Warm hands will tend to read higher, while cold hands tend to read lower. The PI value will also be displayed numerically on the display screen in addition to the LED bar graph. This is the factory default. You can elect to turn off the numerical display, leaving only the PI bar graph. Instructions for turning the numerical PI display off can be found in the operator's manual. Now that you have mastered proper sensor application and are familiar with the basic operation of the device, you are ready to take measurements with the Rad57. Power on the unit. Immediately upon powering up, all LEDs will temporarily illuminate as the device runs a self-check to ensure it is functioning properly. The numbers displayed are the alarm limits and other device settings. For a full list of available settings on your Rad57, consult your operator's manual. The Rad57 needs no external calibration. Each time the device is powered on, it will run through this self-test. When the display shows SEN off, meaning sensor off, the device is ready. Insert the patient's finger into the sensor, making sure to follow the proper techniques. Have the patient be still. Movement will cause inaccurate readings. Now the Rad57 will calculate the measurements. While the device is detecting the pulse, scrolling zeros followed by dashed lines will appear on the screen. This can take anywhere from 20 seconds for the SpO2 and pulse rate to 120 seconds for SpCO. It is important to note that the dashed lines do not mean that the value is 0. The first screen to be displayed will be the SpO2 and pulse rate screen. The SpO2 value will be on top in red. The pulse rate will be on the bottom in green. The default configuration is for the device to display SpO2 and pulse rate first. You can, however, elect to make SpCO and SpMet display first. The operator's manual contains directions on how to change the default display upon startup. Press the display button to change the numeric display from the SpO2 pulse rate screen to the SpCO and SpMet screen. It may take a few extra seconds, even after the SpO2 and pulse rate values have been displayed, for the SpCO and SpMet to calculate. You will see dashed lines while these measurements are being calculated. Rainbow parameters such as SpCO and SpMet are always displayed in orange. The SpCO reading will be on top. If the device is not enabled with the SpMet parameter, the letters CO will appear in the bottom display window to indicate you're viewing the SpCO measurement. If your device is enabled with the MET hemoglobin or SpMet parameter, the SpMet value will appear on the bottom display below the SpCO value. Orange dots above the arrows labeled %SpCO and %SpMet will help clarify the parameters displayed. The dot will also display above the SpCO arrow when only SpCO is loaded onto the device. The SpCO reading represents the amount of hemoglobin bound to carbon monoxide and is measured as a percentage. So for example, if the Rad57 reads 8, that means that 8% of your patient's hemoglobin is bound to carbon monoxide. You will document this as SpCO equals 8%. Similarly, the SpMet indicates the percent of hemoglobin that is met hemoglobin. For example, a reading of 1.2 would be documented as SpMet equals 1.2%. The display will stay on the SpCO and SpMet screen until you push the display button to cycle through the other parameters enabled on the device. For more information about the operation of the Rad57 and its features, and for troubleshooting, be sure to read the operator's manual or contact your Masimo sales representative. They will be happy to assist you. Now that you're familiar with the operation of your device, there are several important tips and best practices to remember for successful SPCO monitoring. The accuracy specification of the SPCO measurement is plus or minus 3% at one standard deviation for the SPCO range of 1 to 40%. That means that the device will be within 3% of a blood gas reading 68% of the time, and within 6% of a blood gas reading 95% of the time, using the protocols described in the directions for use, and provided it is used in accordance with all directions for use. There are a number of conditions that will negatively impact the readings and a number of contraindications in the directions for use. You should review these carefully. A few examples are patient motion and intravascular dyes or externally applied coloring such as nail polish, low arterial oxygen saturation, and altitude, all of which may lead to inaccurate SPCO and SPMET measurements. If bright light is interfering, the Rad57 will not leave the pulse search phase. It will appear as continuous spinning zeros on the display screen. Be sure you do not move the sensor and have the patient hold still while the sensor is on the patient's finger. Elevated levels of methemoglobin will lead to a falsely elevated SPCO reading. This can be measured with SPMET, non-invasive methemoglobin. If you are using a sensor with ID code H, which is printed on the red connector, your device may not display an SPCO reading when the SpO2 is below 90% or when SPMET is greater than 2%. The SPCO display may show dashed lines instead. If you question the results that you are getting from your device, you should obtain an invasive blood sample and laboratory analysis. If you are planning on comparing an SPCO reading to a laboratory carboxyhemoglobin measurement, it is imperative that the blood draw and the SPCO reading be taken simultaneously from the same location. Delays in laboratory carboxyhemoglobin measurements or analysis can invalidate the comparison. If readings are questionable, ensure you've carefully followed the steps for proper sensor placement and device use and take the readings again. Be sure that you are using an appropriately sized sensor for the patient's finger, that the finger is pushed all the way to the digit stop, that the sensor is properly aligned, and that you are shielding the sensor in environments with excessive ambient light. If you have questions about best practices for monitoring SPCO, contact your sales representative and refer to the directions for use for your device and sensor. Thank you for viewing this training video and for your purchase of the Rad57 pulse co-oximeter.